The UAP Harold. Case File 024. A perfect flying saucer. I want to start in a corridor at CIA headquarters in the middle of December 1952. Because this file is not about a light in the sky at all. It is about two governments, on two sides of an ocean, quietly deciding the same thing at the same time. That the real danger of flying saucers was never the saucers. It was you. It was the public. Here is what happened. A messenger arrives from Britain, and he reports a private conversation he has just had in London with a man named R.V. Jones. If you know your history of the Second World War, that name should make you sit up, because R.V. Jones was the wizard. He was the young physicist who ran British scientific intelligence against the Nazis, who beat their radio beam bombing system, who outthought German radar. And in 1952, Winston Churchill personally called him back into service to be Britain's Director of Scientific Intelligence. This was, by any measure, one of the sharpest minds in the Western world. And the messenger's report about him lands on the desk of a CIA officer named H. Marshall Chadwell, the Assistant Director for Scientific Intelligence at the agency. Chadwell reads it, and then he writes a memorandum for the record, stamps it secret, and files it. 2 pages. Tonight, those 2 pages. A real declassified CIA memorandum dated the 18th of December 1952, held for 74 years and handed back to the public in 2026. And it is one of the most quietly important documents we have ever put on this channel, because of who signed it, and because of what he wrote just a few weeks before he did something that shaped how the world talks about UFOs to this very day. And because this is a Harold file, I will tell you the shape of it up front, so nobody can accuse us of selling a mystery we cannot deliver. There is no crashed craft in this memo. There is no crashed craft in this memo. There is no alien, no sensor track, no piece of metal. It is second-hand, one messenger's account of one conversation. The famous phrase in it, a, quote, perfect flying saucer, is what a group of RAF men said they saw one morning over Yorkshire. It is a real sighting, and we will show you exactly what it was. But it is a description, not a confirmation. What this document actually proves is stranger and colder than any saucer. It catches an intelligence service in writing in the act of deciding that the flying saucer problem was not a problem of the sky, it was a problem of belief. Let's read it. First, as always on this channel, the object itself, the piece of paper, before we weigh a single word of what it says. Because the provenance is the whole reason to trust it. Look at the top of the page and it tells you exactly what it is. 2 lines, stamped, that set the weight of everything below them.
Secret, security information.
Secret, not confidential, secret. A higher bar. This was never meant for you, or for the press, or for the public it is so worried about. And then the form of the thing.
Memorandum for record. 18 December 1952. Subject: British activity in the field of unidentified flying objects.
A memorandum for record. That phrase matters, because it tells you the purpose. This is not a letter to anyone. It is an officer writing down, for the file, a thing he has just learned, so that the institution will remember it. It is the CIA talking to itself. And what it is writing down, in December of 1952, is British activity in the field of flying saucers. The Americans are keeping notes on what the British are quietly doing about UFOs. And at the bottom, the signature. And this is the single most important fact in the entire document. So I want to say his name slowly.
H. Marshall Chadwell, Assistant Director, Scientific Intelligence.
H. Marshall Chadwell. Hold that name, because the whole meaning of this file hangs on it. In December of 1952, Chadwell was the Assistant Director of the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence, and he was, at that exact moment, the single most important man in the United States government on the subject of flying saucers. Here is the record.
H. Marshall Chadwell led the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence in 1952. On the 2nd of December that year, just 16 days before he signed this memo, Chadwell sent an urgent warning to the Director of Central Intelligence, General Walter Bedell Smith, stating that the volume of sightings, quote, reports of incidents convince us that there is something going on that must have immediate attention. He raised the question of whether the sightings could be used, quote, from a psychological warfare point of view, and it was Chadwell who then organized the scientific review that met the following month, in January 1953, chaired by the Caltech physicist H.P. Robertson. The body history now calls the Robertson Panel, the panel that set official UFO policy in America for a generation.
So sit with the timing, because it is the key to the whole night. This memo is dated the 18th of December, 1952. 16 days earlier, its author had told the head of the CIA that something was going on that needed immediate attention and raised psychological warfare. About 4 weeks later, that same author would convene the Robertson Panel. This little 2-page note about the British sits precisely in the middle of that fuse, lit on one end by an urgent warning and on the other by the most consequential UFO committee in American history. It is a snapshot of Chadwell's mind in the weeks he was deciding what the United States should believe about the sources. And the only reason you and I can read it is one line of fresh modern ink across the top of a 74-year-old page.
Approved for release, 2026, under Section 1842 of the National Defense Authorization Act.
The current UFO records law, the same statute that has pried open file after file we have read here. So, a genuine, secret CIA memorandum signed by the architect of the Robertson Panel, released by the government that wrote it. Now, let's follow the messenger. Paragraph 1, and it is almost unbearably spare. 1.5 sentences and then a black box where a name should be. Listen.
On 15 December, the recently arrived messenger from Britain reported the following. He had talked with R.V. Jones and
there, the sentence stops. Because right there on the page, after the word and, is a redaction. A second name, the other person the messenger spoke with in London, is blacked out. 74 years later, released to the public, and they still would not give us that one name. We do not know who it was, and we are not going to guess. But the shape of the thing is clear. An American messenger, freshly back from Britain, debriefing the agency on what 2 British insiders told him about flying saucers. One of them we can read, and his name does a lot of work. Because R.V. Jones was not some minor official, he was, arguably, the most brilliant intelligence scientist of the Second World War. Here is who the CIA was listening to.
Reginald Victor Jones, born 1911, died 1997, was a British physicist and the founding figure of modern scientific intelligence. During the war, he led the scientific intelligence effort against Nazi Germany, unraveling the German radio navigation beams used to guide night bombers over Britain, work Churchill himself credited in the struggle he called the Wizard War. In 1952, at Churchill's personal invitation, Jones returned to government as the Director of Scientific Intelligence at the Ministry of Defense, a post he held until 1954.
So understand what the messenger was carrying. This is not a report of what some enthusiast believes. It is the private, professional opinion of the man Churchill trusted to think about the hardest scientific intelligence questions in Britain on the subject of flying saucers. When R.V. Jones talks about UFOs, the CIA writes it down and stamps it secret, and what he had to say turns out to be the most revealing thing in the file. Because Jones was not frightened of the saucers, he was worried about something else entirely. Let's hear what Britain had actually been doing. Paragraph 2. And this is the part that, when I first read it, genuinely surprised me, because it is a state secret being handed across the Atlantic almost casually. Listen.
The British have had a standing committee created about 16 months ago on flying saucers. Presumably, this is now under Dr. Jones through inheritance. The RAF are action people. The group has concluded that the observations are not enemy aircraft and that none have been over Britain.
Read that again, because there is a lot buried in 4 sentences. First, the British have a standing committee on flying saucers. a secret official government body, created, the memo says, about 16 months earlier, studying UFOs. This is 1952. The public image of that era is that flying saucers were a joke, a tabloid silly season story. And here is the CIA recording, in a secret memo, that the British government had quietly stood up a committee to take them seriously. And that committee was real. Here is the record.
In October 1950, the British Ministry of Defence set up a secret body called the Flying Saucer Working Party, on the initiative of the government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Henry Tizard, who felt UFO reports should not be dismissed without serious study. Its small team analyzed sightings by RAF and Royal Navy personnel and delivered its final report in June 1951, concluding that the cases could be explained by misidentification, illusion, or hoax. The work was folded into Britain's Directorate of Scientific Intelligence, which R.V. Jones took over in 1952.
So the memo's, quote, 16 months ago, lines up almost exactly with that lineage. The working party and the standing committee that grew out of it, now, as Chadwell puts it, under Dr. Jones through inheritance. He inherited the saucer file along with the job. And notice the committee's official conclusion, the one the memo underlines for Langley: the observations are not enemy aircraft, and none have been over Britain. That is the reassuring half. Whatever people are seeing, Britain's experts have decided it is not Russian bombers, and it is not over British soil. And I love the little throwaway line in the middle. The RAF are action people. It is almost a shrug. The airmen want to do something. The scientists have concluded there is nothing hostile to do anything about. But then, and this is where the file turns. The memo says the calm did not last. Because 10 to 12 days before that 15th of December, something happened over Yorkshire that put a perfect flying saucer into the newspapers and put the fear of the public into R.V. Jones. Paragraph 3. This is the heart of the file, the passage that gives tonight its name. And it is worth slowing all the way down for, because almost every word of it can be checked against the real historical record. Here is what Chadwell wrote.
The activity has been quiet and normal up to about 10 to 12 days ago, at which time the Yorkshire incident took place. In some RAF field, there was some sort of demonstration to which high officials of the RAF in London had been invited. During the show, a, quote, perfect flying saucer was seen by these officials as well as RAF pilots. So many people saw it that many articles appeared in the public press.
A perfect flying saucer. Seen not by a farmer, not by a drunk on a country lane, but by high officials of the RAF and by RAF pilots, trained military airmen, at an official RAF demonstration. And so many of them saw it that it spilled into the newspapers. Now, the memo's own dating is a little loose. It says 10 to 12 days before mid-December. But the description is unmistakable, and it matches, almost word for word, one of the most famous sightings in British history. Here is what the record shows that phrase points to.
On the 19th of September 1952, at RAF Topcliffe in North Yorkshire, a group of officers and airmen watched what they described in the official report as, quote, a perfect flying saucer. A silver, circular object that followed a meteor jet on its approach, then descended with a strange swinging pendulum motion like a falling leaf. It happened during Operation Mainbrace, a large NATO naval exercise, and it was one of several sightings by military witnesses during that exercise. The press coverage that followed helped push the British Air Ministry, the next year, to set up a dedicated UFO desk within its intelligence branch.
That is the Yorkshire incident. And I want to be scrupulously honest with you about one wrinkle, because honesty about the seams is the whole job here. Chadwell's memo places the sighting 10 to 12 days before the 15th of December, which would be early December. The famous Topcliffe sighting was in September. So either the messenger simply misremembered the timing of a story that was still very much in the air that winter, or he was referring to a later echo of it. But the details, an RAF field, high RAF officials and pilots as witnesses, the exact phrase, perfect flying saucer, and the wave of press articles matched the Topcliffe event. so precisely that it is almost certainly what is being described. We are flagging the date mismatch out loud and telling you it is Topcliffe, because that is what the evidence says. And here is the thing that matters most. The reason this paragraph is the center of the whole document. It is not the saucer, it is Jones's reaction to it. Because the last sentence of that paragraph is where the mask slips. Watch what Chadwell records about how R.V. Jones, Britain's sharpest scientific mind, actually felt about the Yorkshire sighting. Not curious, not excited, disturbed. And listen to why.
This is disturbing to Jones because he realizes that the creation of the correction of public opinion is a part of his responsibilities.
Read that sentence 3 times, because it is the quiet hinge of this entire episode. What disturbs the man is not that a perfect flying saucer was seen by his own Air Force. What disturbs him is the newspapers. It is that so many people saw it that it got into the public press, and that managing what the public believes about it, quote, the creation of the correction of public opinion, is now part of his job. Think about how strange and how revealing that is. Here is a scientist, a spy master, in charge of a secret UFO committee. And the problem he is wrestling with is not what are these things. His committee already settled that to their own satisfaction, not enemy aircraft, none over Britain. The problem he is wrestling with is what do we tell people, and how do we correct them when they get the wrong idea? The saucer is not the threat. The story is the threat. Public belief is the threat. And that is the exact instinct, almost the exact words, that was about to become official American policy a few weeks later, under the man reading this very memo. We are getting ahead of ourselves. But hold that phrase, the correction of public opinion, because it is going to come back on page 2 in an American accent and much colder. First, though, Jones does something that tells you he is a serious scientist and not a propagandist. He reaches for history. Paragraph 4. In the middle of all this worry about public opinion, R.V. Jones does the thing a real scientist does. He reaches for precedent. He hands the American messenger 2 historical references, and both of them are, quietly, brilliant. Listen.
Jones reminded us of the Swedish incident. Presumably he refers to the one in 1946, and reminds us of a paper on the origin of meteorites, published in the French Academy of Sciences between 1760 and 1780 by Chladni.
2 references. Let's take them one at a time because each one is Jones telling the Americans, in code, how to think about this. The first, the Swedish incident of 1946. Here is what he meant.
In 1946, Sweden and its neighbors were swept by the ghost rockets, roughly 2,000 reports of fast, rocket-shaped objects across Scandinavia, around 200 of them tracked on radar. At the time, they were widely feared to be secret Soviet tests of captured German missiles. Investigators later attributed many of them to meteors. No hostile weapon was ever recovered.
Do you see why Jones raised it? The ghost rockets were the last great wave of mysterious objects over Europe, and the great fear then was exactly the same fear as now, that they were a secret Soviet weapon. And in the end, no weapon was ever found. A large share turned out to be meteors and misidentification. Jones is telling the Americans, we have been here before. A panic about hostile craft in the sky that dissolved, on investigation, into natural phenomena and nerves. Do not lose your heads. And then the second reference, which is even more elegant, a paper on the origin of meteorites from the French Academy of Sciences between 1760 and 1780 by Chladni. Here is why that is such a sharp thing to say.
Ernst Chladni, the German physicist, is regarded as a father of the science of meteoritics. In 1794, he argued, against the settled opinion of the day, that meteorites were real objects that fall from space. For years he was ridiculed. Educated men refused to believe that stones could fall from the sky. He was eventually proven right.
Now, that is a subtle and rather beautiful thing for R.V. Jones to reach for, because Chladni is the patron saint of the idea that the scientific establishment can be wrong. For a generation, serious men laughed at the notion that rocks fall from the heavens, and the rocks were falling the whole time. So in one breath, Jones hands the Americans both halves of the honest scientific attitude. The Swedish incident says, "Most sky panics turn out to be nothing, so keep your head." And Chladni says, "But the experts have confidently dismissed real things falling from the sky before, so keep your mind open." That is not the reasoning of a crank, and it is not the reasoning of a scoffer. It is the reasoning of a genuinely careful man. And then, paragraph 5, the exchange runs the other way. The American hands something back.
The traveler told Jones of our interest at this time, mentioned the film which had been taken by the naval non-commissioned officer, the Tremonton incident. It is possible that Jones will write asking for a copy of the film, or further on the same subject.
So it is a two-way trade. The messenger tells Jones the Americans are interested too, and mentions the hottest piece of UFO evidence in the United States at that moment, a piece of film. Here is what the Tremonton incident was.
On the 2nd of July 1952, a U.S. Navy chief warrant officer and photographer named Delbert Newhouse filmed roughly a dozen bright objects over Tremonton, Utah, on color movie film. It became one of the most analyzed UFO films in America. A few weeks after this memo, in January 1953, the Robertson panel reviewed that very film, and controversially concluded the objects were most probably birds.
And that closes the loop in the most telling way. Because the film the messenger mentions to Jones in December is the same film that Chadwell's own Robertson panel would sit down and watch in January and explain away as seagulls. Everything in this little memo is pointing forward, toward that panel. The British committee, Jones's worry about public opinion, the Tremonton film, they are all tributaries running into the same event. And on page 2, Chadwell writes down where the river is going. So turn the page. Literally. Page 2 of this memorandum is a different kind of writing. No more messengers and conversations. It is cold, numbered, institutional. It is Chadwell laying out for the file exactly how the United States government should think about flying saucers. And it opens with a sentence that is the whole doctrine in one line.
While there is no indication that these objects represent a direct threat to the national defense, there are certain potential dangers which are related to these sightings.
There it is. No direct threat. The objects themselves are not going to bomb anyone, but there are potential dangers related to the sightings, not to the objects, to the sightings, to the phenomenon of people seeing and reporting things, and then he lists them, 1, 2, 3. And this is the passage that echoed for the next 40 years, so hear each one exactly as he wrote it.
1. The difficulty and delay in positive identification, which could weaken the early warning system in alerting our defense in the event of the commencement of hostilities.
That is the reasonable one, and it is real. If the skies are full of people crying saucer, then when the real Soviet bombers come, the genuine warning could be lost in the noise. The flood of false reports could clog the early warning system. A signal-to-noise problem. Fair enough. But it is the second danger where the temperature drops through the floor.
2. The possibility of mass hysteria, which might be purposely induced by an enemy at a critical time by faked reports.
Mass hysteria, purposely induced by an enemy, by faked reports. Sit with what is being imagined there. Chadwell is envisioning the Soviets deliberately flooding America with fake flying saucer reports on the eve of an attack to whip the public into a panic and paralyze the country from within. The saucer in this vision is not a Soviet weapon in the sky, it is a Soviet weapon in the mind. It is psychological warfare, and the ammunition is belief itself. And then the third, which follows straight from it.
3. The possibility that the emergency communication systems to command headquarters might be seriously overloaded at a critical time by such reports.
The phone lines to command flooded with panicked citizens reporting lights exactly when those lines are needed for the real emergency. So put the three together and you have the entire official theory of the flying saucer as a security problem. And notice what is missing from it. Not one of the three dangers has anything to do with whether the objects are real. All three are about people. About reports, hysteria, overload, belief. The threat is not the thing in the sky. The threat is the human response to it. And Chadwell even assigns the follow-up to the agencies that handle the public mind.
With respect to mass hysteria, It is believed this problem would lie with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and the Interdepartmental Committee on Internal Security. With respect to communications overloading, each of the individual military services should examine this problem.
And now the piece of history that makes this page detonate. Remember the date? 18th of December 1952? Chadwell writes down this theory, UFOs as a psychological and public order danger, not a physical one. And about 4 weeks later he convenes the Robertson panel. And here is what that panel concluded.
The Robertson panel met from the 14th to the 17th of January 1953. After 12 hours of review, it concluded that UFOs were not a direct physical threat to national security, but that they posed an indirect danger through the clogging of communication channels and the risk of public hysteria. It recommended a policy of, quote, debunking, reducing public interest in UFOs through the mass media and educational programs, and the monitoring of civilian UFO groups.
Read that against page 2 of the memo you just heard, and it is the same idea, in the same words, weeks apart, from the same man. The potential dangers Chadwell listed on the 18th of December became, in January, the official finding of the Robertson panel. And the Robertson panel's recommendation, debunk, reduce public interest, monitor the believers, is R.V. Jones's phrase from page 1, the correction of public opinion, translated into an American program and put into action. That is what makes this humble, 2-page memo so important. It is not evidence of a craft. It is the sketch, in the architect's own hand, of the doctrine that would teach the public to laugh at the subject for the next 40 years. So let's do the deflation properly, the way we always do. Because there is a calm, sober reading of this file, and you deserve the strongest version of it before I tell you what I think survives it. Here is the case for it being far less than it sounds.
You spent half an hour dressing up an office memo as a thriller. Look at what is actually on the page. There is no craft here, no radar track, no photograph, no fragment, no measurement, nothing but a second-hand account of a conversation. One messenger tells the CIA what one British scientist said, and half of the second man's name is blacked out. Your, quote, perfect flying saucer was a silver disc that descended like a falling leaf, which is a pretty fair description of a rocking, sunlit balloon, or debris, or an optical trick, and Britain's own committee looked at all of it and concluded, in plain language, that these were not enemy aircraft and none had ever been over Britain. In other words, the very experts in this memo decided there was nothing there. As for the frightening page 2, that is not a revelation. It is a bureaucrat doing his job, worrying that false alarms could clog an air defense network in wartime. That is sensible, mundane, and boring. Strip the music away, and this file says what the skeptics always said. People see ordinary things, misjudge them, and the reports become a nuisance. That is the whole story.
And a great deal of that is fair. I will say so plainly, because honesty cuts both ways here. On the physical question, the skeptic is simply right, and it is not close. There is no craft in this document. There is no data. The Yorkshire sighting is a described object, not a confirmed one, and the descriptions of that era's best cases, Topcliffe, Tremonton, were, and still are, argued over. Britain's own committee concluded the objects were not enemy aircraft and not over British soil. If you came here for proof that sources are real, this memo does not give it to you, and anyone who tells you it does is selling you something. But there are two things. The calm reading cannot dissolve. And neither one is about aliens. They are about power and about belief. The first is that the skeptic is measuring this file with the wrong ruler. It was never a sighting report. It is a document about official psychology, about how two governments decided to manage the public's mind. And read as that, it is not boring at all. It is chilling. Because the danger these men actually name is not the saucer. Twice, once in R.V. Jones's phrase, the correction of public opinion, and once in Chadwell's phrase, mass hysteria induced by faked reports, the thing being treated as the enemy is what ordinary people believe. Whatever was or was not in the sky over Yorkshire, The documented instinct of both the British and the American scientific intelligence chiefs was the same. The reports are the problem, and public opinion is the thing to be corrected. That is real. It is in writing, and it is not mundane. And the second thing is what this memo became. Because the deflationary reading treats page 2 as harmless bureaucratic caution, and history will not let you. Those 3 potential dangers were not left on a shelf. Weeks later, they became the official conclusion of the Robertson panel, and that panel recommended a deliberate program of debunking, using the mass media to reduce the public's interest in UFOs and monitoring the citizens who studied them. For decades afterward, the reflex to snicker at anyone who took the subject seriously did not come from nowhere. It was, in part, policy, and you can watch that policy being sketched, in Chadwell's own hand, on the second page of this file. The sources may be nothing. The decision to manage what you were allowed to think about them was not nothing at all. Let's lay the timeline down flat, so you can see the whole shape of it without the narration.
1794, Ernst Chladni argues against ridicule that meteorites fall from space and is eventually proven right. 1946, the Swedish ghost rockets. Some 2,000 reports across Scandinavia feared to be Soviet weapons, later largely attributed to meteors. October 1950, Britain sets up its secret flying saucer working party on Sir Henry Tizard's initiative. June 1951, the Working Party reports that the cases can be explained by misidentification, illusion, or hoax. 2nd of July 1952, Chief Warrant Officer Delbert Newhouse films the objects over Tremonton, Utah. 19th of September 1952, during Operation Mainbrace, RAF men at Topcliffe, Yorkshire, report, quote, a perfect flying saucer. 2nd of December 1952, Chadwell warns the Director of Central Intelligence that something is going on that needs immediate attention and raises psychological warfare. 15th of December 1952, a messenger from Britain reports his conversation with R.V. Jones. 18th of December 1952, Chadwell signs this secret memorandum for record. 14th to 17th of January 1953, the Robertson panel meets, reviews the Tremonton film, and recommends a policy of debunking. 2026, the memorandum is released to the public.
That is the spine. Every date on it is on paper. And look at the shape it makes. A straight line, running from a messenger's report on the 15th of December through a secret memo on the 18th to the Robertson panel 4 weeks later. This file is not a dead end. It is a link in a chain, and the chain ends in a doctrine. So let's do the thing this channel exists to do. Separate what we know from what we do not, with no thumb on the scale. What we know. We know this file is real. A secret CIA memorandum for record, dated the 18th of December 1952, signed by H. Marshall Chadwell and released in 2026. We know Chadwell was the CIA's chief on scientific intelligence and the man who convened the Robertson panel weeks later. We know it records a messenger's report of a conversation with R.V. Jones, Britain's real director of scientific intelligence. We know Britain really did have a secret UFO study body, the Flying Saucer Working Party, which concluded the cases were misidentification, illusion, or hoax. We know the, quote, perfect flying saucer phrase matches the real RAF Topcliffe sighting during Operation Mainbrace. And we know page 2 lays out the 3, quote, potential dangers. That became the core of the Robertson panel's finding. Now what we do not know, and we will not shrink the list to make the story neater, we do not know the second name in paragraph 1, it is still redacted. We do not know exactly which event the messenger meant by the Yorkshire incident, or why he dated it to early December when Topcliffe was in September. We have told you it is almost certainly Topcliffe and flagged the date. We do not know what the perfect flying saucer actually was. A described silver disc is not an identified object. And most important of all, this document tells us nothing whatsoever about whether any genuine unidentified craft exists. It never claims to. It is not a measurement of the sky. It is a record of what two governments decided to do about what people were seeing in it. So what do we do with a file like this? We do not tell you it proves aliens. It does not, and it never tried to. There is no craft in it, no data, no metal. The perfect flying saucer is a phrase from a report, not a thing in a hangar. Anyone who sells you this memo as evidence of visitors is lying to you, and we are not in that business. But we will not let the mundane pieces bury what is actually here. Because what is here, read cold and read honestly, is one of the most revealing documents in the whole history of this subject, the moment, caught in writing, when the men in charge on both sides of the Atlantic quietly agreed on the same idea. That the flying saucer was not, in the end, a problem of radar or metal or the sky. It was a problem of belief. That the danger was the public. That the job, in R.V. Jones's own words, was the correction of public opinion. 4 weeks after H. Marshall Chadwell signed this page, he sat a panel of scientists down in a room and had them recommend that the government teach the country to stop taking the subject seriously. And for 40 years, it worked. The next time you feel the reflex to laugh at someone who says they saw something in the sky, remember that the reflex was designed. Remember that the reflex was designed. It has a date, it has a signature, and it is on this page, Case File 024, a perfect flying saucer, filed. This episode was investigated and produced by an autonomous multi-agent AI system. The real, declassified memorandum read line by line, every claim checked against independent sources, and every place we could not confirm something flagged out loud, with nothing extraterrestrial stated as fact. The case file and the source link are in the pinned comment. The UAP. Harold. Declassified. Investigated. Filed.